And I think that's a little bit, as a great segue, a little bit of brutal honesty for the administrators who listen. And so we say that tongue in cheek. This is something that you and I have talked about on the podcast before. We've certainly talked about it in our EC cohorts before, about the idea that, like, brutal honesty is such a shitty phrase to begin with. And this was brought back to the light. And I know we mention Ed Silva all the time on the pod, and we are going to get him on. We're just sorting out availability. But he texted a group chat the other day and essentially said, like, why is honesty, why does that need to be brutal? And, like, why can't we have compassion or, empathy and things like that? Like, why is it brutal honesty? And that's the go-to of how we deliver feedback. And I'll throw it to you for your opening thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think 30,000 foot view, brutal honesty. Usually, first off, it's only those who are able to do that in a position of power. Brutal honesty is never allowed to be brutally honest from down up. It's not like it's this 360-degree feedback kind of thing. And it's typically used in a situation where, again, it's from a position of power, and when the brutal honest statement is over, there is no ability to allow for a rebuttal. It's typically just this one-way piece of communication. It's not a back and forth. And then what I've kind of noticed just over the years is when people are like, "Oh, well, I'm brutally honest," or I say what I think, and then I let it go. Well, you're completely invalidating the person who is receiving said honesty. And just because you feel a certain way about it, it's not like you're allowed to accept that brutal honesty back. Um, and I think a lot of times it's not even so much like the content of what is being said. There are definitely times where people have to be told things they don't want to hear, and we have to say things that we might not necessarily want to say, but it's for the good. And I think a lot of times brutal honesty gets lost in not the content, but the method in which it's done. And I can deliver a brutal truth in a not so brutal way and still deliver the message in a way that might be a little bit more empathetic and impactful, and again, opening up the ability to kind of ask a question coming back my way to help smooth out some of that. Like, a lot of times, to me, brutal honesty is like, oh, I'm telling them the tough things. You're telling them the tough things in an easy way because you're not opening up the ability for there to be back and forth. I can say whatever I want to and slam the door in your face and walk away and not have to think about it. That's a much easier thing. And I think in a lot of ways, brutal honesty is sort of the softer way of going about things. The tough way to go about things is to open up the line of communication, to think about how to deliver that message, to know who it is that you're talking about and deliver it in a way that is going to be more impactful in a positive way, and then allow that question to come back to you, and be in a position of um, not just understanding, but a place of security in your own self, that you feel good in the message that you're delivering. And I'm okay if you need to ask me a question back, because I'm going to be able to answer that question. And I think a lot of times when you hear that term brutal honesty, it's just, I'm going to give you some bad news in a bad way in the easiest, most convenient way for me possible. And then that's end said, end of discussion. Like, that's it. I get to close the door and I get to walk away, which again, in a lot of ways to me is an extremely soft way of, that's not a very brave thing to do, is to just tell somebody something they don't want to hear and then get to opt out of the rest of the conversation and leave them alone. And again, it's typically going to come from top down. There's no student who's allowed to be brutally honest with their teacher, um, and and get away with that. It's just
Right.
it's not something that you're going to see.